y'all, it's Kobe R. Rice, and I'm back again for another weekly creative update. So, just to pop off and jump off, there is something very, very strange happening with like my camera and my laptop computer system. And I don't know, y'all. Hopefully, we'll get through this podcast in a seemingly timely fashion. In any case, I gave you the tech warning. We're just gonna keep it rolling, keep it moving. You guys know I don't really like do too much editing usually, but like I'm trying to keep it like that so I can just like get what's off my chest out there and into the world. So, anyways, welcome back to the epic fantastical journey of a Black female sci-fi writer. I am Kobe R. Rice, novelist, screenwriter slash TV writer, film producer, film director, theater director, dramaturg, game writer, narrative designer, etc., etc., etc. I can't really ever remember everything that I do or that I try to do. Oh, playwright now, I guess. Still like dealing with that. But I am back for another weekly creative update here at my podcast. And as you guys know, if you saw my last podcast, I was away for a really long time, like literally 4.5 months, while I was getting my entire life together. And I just released last week my I'm Back podcast with all those wonderful updates. And in that podcast, I promised you that the next episode coming would be my 10-year wrap up. And so voila, here it is, episode 101. Oh, by the way, can we please have an internal or external round of applause for the fact that I was able to get out 100 episodes of this podcast? Yay! Mind you, I should have hit that milestone a long time ago, being that I started this podcast in November of 2016. But as you guys know, life happens, things get busy, and I'm not always able to come back on a weekly basis. Sometimes I would come back on like a bi-weekly basis or like a monthly basis. And in this case, it was like a Colby is having a moment basis. But now I am back. And I've actually finally been able to schedule in a really solid block of time specifically for this podcast on a weekly basis. Thus far, we'll see when like midterms come around and our little showcases and final exams and stuff come around and I have to be crazy. We'll see what happens. In any case, so let's talk about my 10-year wrap up. But first, I want to give you guys the past tea for the past week. So I have just finished week number 2 at my new theater teaching job, and it is great. It is extremely challenging. There are a lot of different areas in which I have to grow. And I really have to focus my energy in order to like be on point and on par. And finally, thankfully, as of yesterday evening, I was able to finally get mostly caught up with everything that I want to do or that I need to do for this coming week and actually the next week after. And so I'm finally able to, just breathe a little bit more, but not necessarily get complacent, but just breathe. And kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on and really dive headfirst into like a step-by-step, day-by-day, week-by-week, month-by-month plan in order to make sure that the academic year and the artistic year are both meshing and are both like fully supported by really rigorous, in-depth planning and execution. So that's the main thing. Obviously, like theater education now is like a huge part of my life. The same way theater's been a big part of my life for the past few years, but in a very different capacity, in a different way. But it doesn't mean that all my other projects are falling off. And as a matter of fact, before I get into the 10-year overview, I really do want to give you guys a quick update as to other things I've been up to this past week. Or other things that people have been dragging me through this past week, which is actually like a better, more accurate representation of what's really going on for one of these projects. So we are finally in the publishing process with the signing of contracts and everything like that. I actually think that's like the final part of it for Everdark, the novel. No thanks to me whatsoever. Completely thanks to JT. Thank you, JT. She's been really like pushing this forward. And, as you guys know, as I've explained in sort of past podcasts, in the independent publishing and writing world, I have decided both for this year and for next year at the least, that I'm going to be focusing kind of solely on my intellectual properties, developing a larger backlist, really bolstering and scaffolding my own internal marketing and reader engagement, and really just building up my material as opposed to networking, collaborations, and things like that. Not that I don't love doing that, but I do find collaborations take a lot of time and energy, and also the dealing with and handling others' time and energy, which can sometimes completely overcome the creative aspects of being a writer. And I really want to focus, like I focused this year on very, very closely on creativity, especially toward the second half of the year, rather the second to the like the 2/3 of the year. After I decided to depart the box set endeavor, I focused very highly on the creative aspects, and I will continue to focus more closely on the creative aspects of my brand and my business for 2020 and probably 2021 as well. I really do want a much longer backlist that will just get me to where I want to be, not only like career wise, but just like creatively. There's so many ideas I need to get out there. And so the publishing of Everdark, again, thanks to JT for pushing that forward, is happening right now. And we'll actually probably be coming out with it, as I mentioned before, by the end of the month. So I'll let you guys know when it comes, okay? And that will basically be the conclusion of my creative collaborations in publishing for a while. And I'm actually starting to notice that a lot of my colleagues are doing a sort of similar thing in terms of folding back into their dotages or hermitages. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, hermitage or hermitage, but hermitages, and really focusing on the creative aspects in the writing. It's not just like good business sense, but it's also just like good spiritual grooming and caretaking to like focus on what it is you really want to do and express in the world. So I am putting myself in the position of like creative and spiritual self-care by flying solo for like the next 2 years or so, for the most part. Obviously, I will have, speaking of, there is a collaboration, not a collaboration, but a promo that I have to engage in on the 25th. So I will be doing like the occasional cross promo wherein when I reach out to you guys via my newsletters, I will also be promoting an author's book to you guys, an author that I really trust and I like and whose work that I really enjoy. And that'll be for that pretty much. And maybe once in a while I'll participate in, a follower run, getting Instagram followers or something like that. Or I'll participate in like a collaborative book fair or something like that. But that won't be very often. And again, it really depends on like the other books. And I'm really interested in really chunking down and focusing down on the genres that I really am into and that I read, because I like to be able to read those and then recommend them to you guys who are really interested in dystopian, post-apocalyptic, sci-fi, fantasy, and urban fantasy stuff. So that's publishing. And then I told you guys last week that I have sort of roused my concept artist for the Sandman project, and I will be delivering my spec documents to him but most likely today, because I won't have any time on Monday to do that. So I'm finishing those up this afternoon, as a matter of fact, right after I do this podcast, and I will be getting that underway. So over the next 2 weeks or so, probably by the beginning of October, I will be getting back some really beautiful concept art for the Sandman TV series that I'm working on. And that's really exciting. Now, mind you guys, a couple of you guys have reached out to me, and I love hearing from my community and people who are fans of my work. I love that. You guys are like my family, so thank you so much. But one of you, Miss Gaines in particular, I think maybe misinterpreted what I'm trying to do with Sandman, not in a bad way, in a great way. And you told me congratulations on getting it greenlit. And I really, really love that. Thank you so much, first and foremost. I love that concept, or the thought that you think that I got greenlit. But I actually didn't get greenlit for Sandman. I did not get greenlit for Sandman. I greenlit myself for Sandman. And actually, I loved your comments so much that I'm actually going to title this podcast Giving Yourself the Green Light, or self greenlighting, or greenlighting yourself, whatever. That's what this podcast is going to be called, because that is not only what I did for Sandman, that's actually what I did for my creative career. And I will get into that very specifically when I'm giving you guys my roundup for the past 10 years of what I've been doing creatively. So it's just very fortuitous and serendipitous, really, that you mentioned me getting the green light on my project, when in fact it was me deciding that I was going to write the series, I was going to direct the series, I was going to storyboard the series, get story consultant and script doctor feedback on the series, produce it, everything, raise the money for it myself. And that has essentially basically been my life since maybe 2012, is giving myself the green light. So having said that, let's jump right into it, into my update, because those are really the only two updates that I have for you guys thus far, but it's very timely, the green lighting situation, and I want to get into it. So let's do it. So, green lighting yourself, all right? Literally the theme of not just the past 10 years, but essentially my entire life. And this is honestly is not to brag, but like nothing was ever given to me. Every single thing I have ever gotten in my entire life, I had to like literally scratch and claw, and not in like a competitive way. I just mean like scratch and claw my way out of the darkness and really work hard for it, right? But I didn't really understand the power of entrepreneurship, especially in the arts, and taking things by the horns and owning it and giving yourself permission, really until about maybe 2012. There was a major turning point for me then. And there actually are a few major turning points for me in this story. But let's start from the beginning. And I'm not going to, it's not going to be like a 2-hour podcast. I'm going to try to make this like 30 to 45 minutes. And then I'm going to sign off because I have other stuff to do. Much as I love you guys. So my 10-year journey as a creative really kind of started in 2009. And that was the year that I was graduating from college, Hunter College, CUNY. Yay! I love Hunter. And when I ever get like super rich, I will give them all my money. That and Prep 9 and probably the Hotchkiss School a little bit. Because it really was a wonderful time in my life for undergrad. But 2009, I was honestly really lying to myself. And the reason why I say that is because for the past 3 years, I had just thankfully been able to achieve an entry into the NIMCOR program, which is Career Opportunities in Research Education program. And I was actually really excited about it and really passionate about it. But the reason why I had applied for the program just originally was because I had just transferred from Hamilton College Upstate back home to Hunter College. And although Hunter College was significantly cheaper, I still needed a way to pay for it. And I had been working maybe like 2006, 2007. Yes, part-time in a grocery store to like pay my bills and also to pay my college tuition. So I was working my way through college. Even after having gotten scholarships for my other college, I basically like started over for a lot of like different personal reasons. worked my way through for that year, applied, and then got into this amazing program, which had given me like tuition remission. So no tuition paid. They gave me health insurance, like $1,000 a month stipend. We had like our own little office to work at computers and stuff like that. And we had one-on-one individual mentorship and training in the research area, and well, not just sociology, but the social sciences. So sociology, anthropology, and psychology. And the entire purpose of the program was to not just like pay us just to, be a part of it, but to prepare us to go into PhD programs. And a lot of us did go on to PhD programs. A lot of us, and it was obviously geared towards people of color, so that was great. A lot of us, though, I think once we got there, realized that the ivory tower was not exactly the place that we wanted to sort of make our lives and our careers. It's a very hostile environment. I'm just going to be real. And I think most of us were like, okay, thanks for the money and all the training, and now we're brilliant, and we're going to leave with terminal masters or just masters and like peace out. I think a lot of us did that. But then also many of us did go on to get our PhDs and are now working in academia specifically because of this program. So I see the program as a success because it helped more underserved communities to get to higher levels of education. And that's to me very valuable. But as I was going through the program and sort of going through all of the motions, I realized that I had been really suppressing what it was that I actually wanted to do. And I had been taking English classes, creative writing classes in undergrad and sort of separately. And I was also just writing a lot. But I still hadn't formulated my first real beginning to end story. But I knew that I wanted to make a career as a writer. I knew that. But because I hadn't produced any work at that point, and I also didn't have any knowledge of any real pathway to pursue my artistic dreams, I was like, well, going for a doctoral degree is really fancy and really great. It's fully funded. And why not? I might as well do that. And you don't, and also I would have been the first person in my family really to get a doctoral degree, to my knowledge. I think maybe I have a cousin, some distant cousin somewhere down south who also has his doctoral degree, but I've never met him before and nobody talks about him. So it doesn't mean that he doesn't exist and like his accomplishments are not valid, but like as far as I'm concerned, I would have been the only doctor that any of my family actually like knew, you know what I'm saying? So when you have an opportunity to do that and you've been fully funded, you're going to be fully funded again, same sort of conditions except more money, more support at like literally the best sociology program in the country. And at that point in time, it was also one of the best in the world. You don't say no. You just go. You don't say, no, mom and dad, I think I'm just going to go and like be a starving artist or a writer. Like you just don't do that as a Black female from an underserved community. So I went. And I also felt like, okay, I don't really know all the ropes of the doctoral program, but I have enough flexibility to work on my stuff on the side, right? Which was actually very, very true. I did have a lot of flexibility, and the doctoral level of graduate school is entirely different from the master's level in many ways, which is entirely different from the undergrad level. But I didn't really receive much of a culture shock because we had been very well prepared by our program, by how the doctoral programs would be structured or whatever. So I go off to UW-Madison, really great program, really amazing program. Although it's very quantitative, I felt like I really wanted to be a writer and be an artist. But I still didn't know any particular pathway. Now, this was in 2009. Just a year before, Amazon KDP, well, it wasn't KDP at the time, but Amazon had just started its foray into opening up the world of publishing to independent authors, okay? When you're a book writer and you're a novelist, basically, at that point in time, you weren't getting your book published except for one of two ways. One, through a vanity press, who usually take a lot of your money and don't really help you that much with getting your book out there. It's really just you paying them to publish your book. or you had to go through a traditional publisher, which had to see marketing and commercial potential in your book. And even before the publishers even looked at your proposal, you had to find an agent or an editor who actually took interest in you. And that requires either some really good queries or proposals or some really, 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 really good connections. Usually, most people who get published have really good connections. That's number one. Are really famous. So like if Justin Timberlake wanted to come out with like a biography or autobio, he wouldn't really need any help getting a publisher because they know he's going to sell out, and also he has like 50 million agents on his side anyway. Or you have to write a really amazing, really unique proposal in a niche and a genre that hasn't really been mined yet, but has like a lot of potential. Hence Twilight, hence Hunger Games. But a lot of those genres too sort of kind of have a 10-year resurgence. If you notice, as a side note, vampires are really big and popular like almost every 10 years or whatever. Just listen to Anne Rice in any of her interviews as to how she views the vampire urban fantasy genre, and she's been around for a very long time. She actually was the inspiration for where I got my pen name from, Colby R. Rice. The R is from my middle name. Rice is I took from her. Colby was just like, I need something that sounds either male or gender neutral so that people don't really know that it's me or like try to prejudge this book before they buy it. That's a whole different podcast that we'll get into in a second. Or not in a second, but like later. Anyway, she has said that in her very long tenure as a writer of horror and urban fantasy, she has seen vampires become super popular and sexy and in like at least 3 or 4 times. Like once every decade, there's a resurgence. So I am writing my vampire novels, but I'm going to be waiting until that resurgence comes back. So I'm at like the front of that wave, just like maybe like a year or so before that resurgence comes back, I'll be releasing my vampire-ish novels. So, but those were the only really 3 ways you're going to get published. But Amazon KDP basically said, you know what? We're actually going to create a platform that allows authors to independently publish their work. And if you guys know anything about the publishing industry, I know a lot about it, not as much as a lot of other people, but a lot about it because it's my industry as well. It was a smash success. I mean, hundreds to thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of writers now have the opportunities to get their works out there and to build careers as mid-list authors and to build fan bases because Amazon basically opened the floodgates and essentially poached a lot of potential talent that traditional publishers were ignoring at the time. And this really started about a year before I graduated. I didn't know it was happening until I was well on my way to my doctoral program. Still, and that was like maybe in like early 2010, honestly. Still, something in the ether must have been tugging at me because the summer of 2009, that's when I first sat down to start building the world and the characters for the Books of Ezekiel series. And originally, my series was called The Last Alchemist. And there will be a book in the Books of Ezekiel series entitled The Last Alchemist because that's still like a sort of theme. But the characters were different. The entire sort of basis of the series was, I mean, it started off so much differently than how it turned out. And I'm really happy with how it turned out, actually. But I really, for whatever reason, decided, you know what? I'm about to go to graduate school. I really want to write my novel because I've been writing since I was 10 years old at that point in time. I was 24 years old at that point. I had 14 years of just sort of casual, piles and piles of composition notebooks just filled with stories and ideas. And I said, you know what? I'm going to really figure out how to do this novel thing and just do it. So I moved that summer from New York to Madison, and I had no furniture. At that point, I was waiting for my first infusion of my scholarship money to come in. So I stepped on the floor. I sat on the floor. I don't know if I had internet at that point in time. It hadn't been turned on. And because I had no internet or nothing like that, I spent the entire summer writing my story and building my world for the Books of Ezekiel in a 3-ring notebook or a 3-subject notebook. And it was one of the best sort of impromptu, unintended writing retreats I had ever done in my life. You want to get a lot of writing done? Turn off the TV, turn off the internet, literally put yourself in a room with nothing but yourself and either a laptop or a pen and lots of paper. I really like pen and paper because I can do laptops and I love typing. I type really fast, but I get screen tired. So that was like the genesis of me starting my journey as an artist, trying to get this story out of me. And even prior to that, it had been trying to come out, and my entrepreneurial spirit had been trying to come out through my my official establishment of my own press called Bengal Moon, okay? Bengal Moon Press. And eventually I kind of let that go because I didn't I filed all the paperwork, but you're supposed to, in New York, you're supposed to announce the opening of your business in some kind of public publication, and I didn't. So it got decertified eventually, which is fine because really only about 2 years later, not even 1.5 years later, I actually established my official publishing press that is way more representative of who I am and what I am here to do. And that press is called Rebel Ragdoll Press. Meanwhile, though, I'm still in graduate school and I'm in the demography program and the demography cohort. So I am doing all the core classes in my first year, the core seminars. I have started my teaching assistantships. And so I am now figuring out the balance between my classes, my research for my master's degree, and for my TA-ships. At the same time, I'm also really super in love with this novel and the series that I'm putting together. It was such a wonderful, very innocent, naive dive into my creative life. And it was one of the best times ever. And I actually did like a lot of sneaking around with my writing where I would go into my seminars. Sometimes like these seminars would just be like professors presenting their research or what have you. And you're supposed to be paying attention, but really you're not being tested. It's not a quiz. It's not anything. And I would spend most of those seminars in the back writing my novel. It was so rude. I didn't mean to be rude, but I didn't want to admit it at the time, but I was way more invested, way more interested, way more in love with my creative life than I was with my doctoral life. And not only is that because that is who I am and that's where my spirit is, that's where my truth is, but it's also because the doctoral life, even though I was prepared for the structure, I wasn't really prepared for the change in focus. When I was studying sociology at the undergrad level, I was able to do a lot of community and public sociology, where I would take my analytical and quantitative analysis skills, go and collect data out of our communities for big nonprofits and other sort of community endeavors, analyze that data and write up reports that would help these nonprofits or these organizations to basically provide better services and give better programs, create better programs for the communities that they were interested in helping. And that work I found incredibly fulfilling. The fact that my immediate sociological and quantitative skills in, regression analysis and stuff was helping an organization to better serve their target audience, that gave me a lot of fulfillment. When I got to graduate school, though, my doctoral program, a lot of my sociological study and the emphasis and like the social capital pretty much sat in old theoretical books, and the only way you could ever really be taken seriously or get real cred in the ivory tower system is to do a lot of research and publish that research in journals, which only your peers would read. And there was sort of a sector in our school called public sociology, but it was pretty well known that public sociology was not very highly regarded or well respected. And a lot of mentors, faculty members were really not so thinly veiled in their condescension towards people who actually wanted to apply their knowledge to helping the world. It was really about publishing to your peers and getting in the most prestigious, exclusive, and obscure journal in the world. And I did not find any joy or pleasure or, you know, just meaning in that at all. And so it was very hard for me to connect with my studies. And the more I disconnected from my studies, the more I was able to focus on my writing and my creativity, and the more I fell in love with it. Now, mind you, I still had to fulfill the requirements of the program, and I still had really great reviews every single semester because I was still treating sociology, the PhD, as a job. I show up, go to class, do my work, do the readings, and then at the end of the day, I shut my brain off and I switch it over to something else, either to video games, Netflix, personal life, family, friends, and of course, my writing and my creativity. So that was really great preparation for just the next 10 years that will be coming. This is all 2009, 2010. In terms of being able to compartmentalize my life into the things that I have to do versus the things that I want to do. So I was still getting really great reviews. And I didn't really feel comfortable or confident yet at that point to make a clear jump from the doctoral side to my creative side. Because again, I was enjoying that much more, but there was no way I could make my creativity legible or make it into a career because I just didn't have the knowledge. But as of 2010, maybe mid to late 2010, early 2011, I started to gain that knowledge because I was really becoming not really disgruntled, but just sort of disconnected from my studies. And as I started to look into the creative side of my life, I also started to look at how to monetize my creativity and how to engage with the business aspects of creativity. And this is when I really started to find out more and more about independent publishing. I discovered thecreativepen.com, which is Joanna Penn's amazing publishing blog. I still follow it to this day. I'm not able to keep up as much as I would like because #life, but I'm still very much subscribed. I love her blog. I love her podcast especially. She's a huge force in publishing. She's been in the game pretty much since 2008, 2009. So it's a very interesting, I'm not Joanna Penn by any stretch of the imagination, but we kind of started to distance ourselves, from our day-to-day lives and walk more into our creativity around the same time. But she turned her creativity into a podcast, into a blog, into a active life of discovery and self-discovery, and I had not gotten there yet. I would not get there for another maybe 3 years. But thankfully, because the universe is very kind, she went on her journey before I did, and so I was able to really see what she was doing. And if you guys are interested in going, it's www.thecreativepen, that's PENN.com. And it's an amazing blog, and you will love it if you're interested in independent publishing. So I was following her career and really watching her and seeing what she did. And at the same time, I had a very personal, deep level shift. In my sociology life, that has sort of exploded temporarily because we, in 2010, 2011, were pushing back against Governor Walker's march, essential political campaign against unions. And he was doing a lot of union busing. So for all the stuff that you're seeing across the nation with these fat cats being able to successfully disenfranchise unions, that started in Wisconsin, literally in Madison, Wisconsin. And we did everything that we could, the entire city, teachers, faculty, not so much police. They sort of went to the other side eventually, and firemen until their union started to get, attacked a little bit. We collectively pushed back against Walker. So there was a huge sort of ignition of social justice and social movements on my sociological side of life. And so I was engaging with that, and I found that really exciting and interesting, but it still wasn't enough to fully capture my attention. And after sort of all of that sort of calmed down and died down, I really realized that I wanted to expand my personal world. So in 2011, literally after I established my publishing press and while I'm still learning about independent publishing, I decided that May to take my first overseas trip. And it was literally it was the first time I had been outside of the United States. I was 26, 27 at the time. 26. My first time outside of the United States, with the exception of the fact that I was born in Bitburg, Germany. So my parents were in the Air Force and they were over there. That's where I was born. But since coming over to the United States as a baby, I had not been back outside of the United States since. And I wanted to see the world. I really was super excited about it. I saved up a lot of my money and tax returns and all that stuff. And I just said, I'm just going to take this money and like go the cheapest route that I can, but still have enough to enjoy myself and take a full-on 6-week trip, solo backpacking trip by myself across the entirety of Europe. And of course, I was terrified, and so was my family. And especially because I had like a huge terror of flying. I do not like flying. To this day, I'm not really a fan of flying, but like I don't have nearly as much fear about it as I used to, and I'm okay with it. But I'm still not like, hey, I love going on planes. That's my daughter. She loves going on planes. That's like she lives for that. I do not. But I had to overcome that fear, overcome the fear of being in a completely foreign series of countries, not just one country, but a series of countries completely by myself, and really just like get it together and get my life. That was literally, though, the best thing I had ever done for myself and my creativity. I wrote so much on that trip. I also was completely and totally disconnected from the world. Like, not the world at large, but the world that I knew. Like, people couldn't call me every day and like talk up 3 hours of my time because I had really no phone. Like, I left my other phone at home. I got like a little burner with an international SIM card, only for emergencies. And if somebody wanted to talk to me, we could do a quick phone call, really quick, or they could send me an email, or we could do like a Skype. So the requirement from my family was that they had to hear from me in some way, shape, or form at least once every 48 hours, once every 24 hours. And that was really that. But for 6 weeks, I was just like out. And I backpacked across, was it 12 countries and 26 cities in 6 weeks. And I had the most amazing experiences. I mean, I will never forget that trip, ever. Nothing will ever compare to it. It was perfect. The weather was perfect. Everything was perfect. I had like some traumatizing experiences. That's a whole different podcast. And there were some very sketchy dangers occasionally, but aside from that, like, I had a ball. I went to Madrid. I have to like decide, I have to figure out like which countries, because I've been on a couple other trips. Madrid, I backpacked, I went to Germany, and I visited Berlin, which was incredible and amazing. I also visited Potsdam, which is like where all like the castles of like the German monarchy or the German royalty lived, and was actually just a few miles away from where I was born. The air base is no longer there. It's been decommissioned and sort of deconstructed, but like it was nice knowing that I was literally like a couple miles away from where I was actually born. It was great. I went to France and I fell in love. Oh my gosh. I like, to this day, I at some point want to spend some extended time living in France. Love it. I went to Paris. I went to Blois, where all the castles were. I backpacked down the entire length of the Italian boot, and it was amazing. Not really much of a fan of northern Italy, not gonna lie, but middle and southern Italy, I adore. So yeah, definitely had a delicious like riverside lunch with wine in Venice. It was great, or canal side rather, because they have canals. I didn't do the gondola rides, but definitely had a lovely lunch there and did like a lot of walking and just explored. I went to Pompeii and back and trekked through Pompeii, and that was really incredible and amazing. Went to Rome briefly. That was kind of crazy. I wasn't able to really get into Rome because of the craziness of the hostel that I was in. But on my next trip, I fell in love with it and it was great. Saw the Colosseum, saw just everything, everything. And then I forget, I went so many places. I'm not gonna like just keep going on and on, but it was amazing. And I ended my trip with a one, maybe not 1 week, but maybe like a 9-day stay in Ireland, where I was able to visit not only Dublin but Glendalough. And I met this friend who I just adore to this day and beyond. Hi Prissy, if you're watching this. And it was just like an instant fast friendship, and we did like, what was it, like a 10-mile hike or something like that in a single day. I had never really hiked before, so that hike destroyed me, but it was the most incredible, breathtaking, beautiful hike I had ever been on. Water as clear as the sky, like not in LA sky, but like wherever the sky is. It was just gorgeous, and it was so magical the whole trip, and it was so eye-opening that I had become a travel bug instantly. And so then in 2013, when I was graduating as a gift to myself for getting my master's, I went back to Europe. That trip was a little bit kind of cray cray, not nearly as fun as the first trip, because maybe it just wasn't in the universe. But like Europe was just like kind of like a mess. But I did enjoy many aspects of that trip as well. But that 2011 trip really helped to ignite my self-identity and change me completely, and also really had me focusing on the things that I really enjoy doing and that I really love. And pretty much when I got back in the year of 2011, my creative spirit had started to take off. So I started working more on my stuff, getting more into the marketing and business aspects of indie publishing, and also decided to switch from my demography concentration into a sociology of literature concentration. Because although I was awoken at that point, I was still sort of trying to hang on to the legitimacy of my sociological journey and my impending PhD, even though it was not meant to be, and I didn't want to admit it at that point. In any case, I was working on my thesis, which was actually delving into Black science fiction and Black sci-fi writers who were on the vanguard of independent indies, that's the same thing, who were on the vanguard of indie publishing in science fiction. And I really enjoyed my time with the community in certain aspects. In other aspects, there were a lot of, just let's say, fractious situations that I witnessed in that community. And I just decided that I wanted to be more in a sort of a healthier collaborative space. So personally, I had decided, okay, maybe this space is not for me, but for my sociological master's degree, I was fascinated. And so I really still tried to mesh those two things together. But the turning point came when I presented my draft to my mentor at the time, and I was told that the draft, even though I had submitted not just this, but several other drafts that were never edited, the draft would not be sufficient to move me forward. And I was crushed, obviously, because I had written over 100 something pages and had all this data and had all these things. And I was like, man, this is really crushing to me. So I walked out with my thick stack of what I thought were brilliant thoughts, and I sat under a tree, and I just decided, you know what? This is really the end. This is the end. In a good way, like not in a bad way. This is where I stop pretending. This is where I really reclaim who I am, and this is where I greenlight myself to take on a life as a creative. That was in essentially like the summer of 2012. And I experienced such a transformation at that point because I had decided I'm going to publish my novel within the next year. I'm going to find ways to hone my writing skills and to find a pathway to becoming a paid writer. And I'm going to leave here with a terminal, well, it's not really terminal, but with a master's of science in sociology because I've been here for 4 years and I need to be able to show something for all the work that I did, right? So that year it was on and popping. I actually started taking classes that completely had nothing to do with my degree. I got back into my language courses, took French, took English, took a bunch of creative writing classes, took a playwriting class where I met my now mentor, who's amazing and who's going to come into my story in a big way in just a second. And I also started taking my first filmmaking classes, screenwriting classes, and my entire world just blossomed and opened up. I was literally the most happy, well-watered, centered, just grateful, balanced individual you could have ever meet. Smiling all the time. I didn't really go out as much as I could have with like friends, but I spent a lot of time focusing on building what I was now seeing or thinking of as like my creative empire. At this point, Rebel Ragdoll Press was still just a press. It wasn't like a whole movement, but Colby R. Rice was really emerging. And by basically 2013, I had decided that I was going to try to become a television writer because in my study of screenwriting and film production, I somehow stumbled across the idea or the actual real life concept that, oh my gosh, television shows, which I love and I adore television, actually have teams of writers who are writing for them. This is a world that I had completely been unaware of my entire life, and I did not discover until 2012. So I said, I think I can train myself to really be a fantastic television writer in drama because I knew that I wasn't going to be in comedy. I can be funny, but it's not really like my thing. I love drama scripts and drama television shows. I live for it. And so 2012 to 2013 was my year of like really reclaiming everything. So as of literally May 2013, I had graduated with my Master's of Sociology with it's not terminal in the larger sense, but like I can't go back for a PhD in Soc because like you have to sign a contract with UW-Madison saying this is the end of my career. I'm not going to use this as a springboard to like go to Northwestern or whatever. So I presented my master's thesis, said they had seen that I had done the work that was required of getting a thesis. Like I said, I had busted my rump on my master's thesis just on period. I graduated with a super high GPA, lots of knowledge, and I'm still grateful for all the training in sociology that I got. Really, like masterful training, amazing experience. It also provided a really solid foundation financially for me because this was the time of the basically the recession and what I call the depression. They don't want to call it depression. People I knew were depressed. So the recession had been going on from 2008 until really the time that I graduated and still is going on to a certain extent. And I graduated being like either the director of like several clubs in filmmaking, screenwriting, film producing, just like because I do really enjoy creating curriculum and being in the position to help others as a leader and as a program coordinator. And I was somehow able to work my way up to the ladder to those positions. Basically student clubs, but I was still like really enjoyed it. I had at that point directed 2 short films, produced a play festival, had written several short plays in my playwriting class with my mentor, and was also actively working on a few screenplays slash teleplays and working on my novel. So really just living my fullest, best creative life and still able to like maintain a living on my own, right? And that was great. And then later that year after I graduated, uh, was really an explosive year because I had been interning. I was interning that summer for a production company and was able to work my way up from like an office PA. I don't know. I don't remember what the exact title was, but from that to line producer on the season one of a digital web series, and then as a production coordinator for season two. Then I worked for Demand Media Studios, who had a partnership with eHow, and I produced a web series for eHow.com on travel gear. And then I was the executive producer for another digital series called The Life Grind Music, with that was like an independent musical sort of docu-series about the musical life in the subways and on the streets of New York City with an actual music artist. And I published my novel. And so literally I had put up, and that novel was like 500 pages long, which I eventually ended up breaking down into two separate novels. But that year was lit. 2013 was like so lit, so lit. And I loved it. I was feeling it. I was here for it. And I had gotten my first credits on IMDb, my first novel published, sitting on top of the world. And I was also saving up my money to move to Los Angeles. And it was great. The next 3 years that would follow, though, would basically see me slowing down significantly because had my daughter. And so for the year of my pregnancy and the 2 years that followed, I was at a stay-at-home mom. I'm just trying to like figure out the timeline in my head. I was like, yeah, 2014. I know when she was born, y'all. 2014, she was born. And then for about 2 years after that, until like mid to late 2016, I was a stay-at-home mom. So I took those 3 years to really focus on my daughter and make sure that she was well watered, well taken care of, that I was being a good mom, because, there's a lot of books out there on how to be a good parent, but none of them, I mean, they're not ever going to really like apply to you all at once. So there's handbooks out there, but there's like not a handbook at the same time. So I did like a lot of like research on like, what do babies do? What are these creatures? Like, this is me at like, what was that? 29. Really like delving into starting my family, right? And trying to figure out the baby thing. And like any mother, especially a first time mother, knows, like, it is not easy. It is crazy. It's insanity. And so I stepped back from my creative endeavors, even though I did not want to, and took that time to focus on motherhood. However, my career and my learning never stopped. I still kept up with Joanna Penn, discovered other blogs, discovered other sources of information, kept studying, kept really looking at other authors' careers, other screenwriters' careers, and started like planning out the steps based on the things that they did. So I had my like plans being built. I also used this time to develop my acumen and my expertise, which is still growing. I'm not even close to being an expert in game writing, but like I used this time to develop my skills in game writing and in narrative design, and I was able to produce over 100 pages of like literal material for my game design, game writing portfolio. I worked for two independent game design and development houses, Myth Kitty Press and Terrorweed Studios. Terrorweed Studios, I think it's called. And it's at Terrorweed Studios that I was able to work on the amazing top mod conversion indie version of the Fallout game series. And the Terrorweed Studios was actually able to get permission from Bethesda, who is the developer of the Fallout franchise, to create its own separate, independently produced game, but set in like a sort of post-apocalyptic westernized world, right? And it was amazing. It was such an amazing experience, and that team was incredible. I mean, Chris Means, who was like the producer of the whole thing, really was able to pull together a lot of really wonderful talent and manage a lot of human resources stuff and do a lot of like just amazing things to like bring together various teams of writers, designers, programmers, concept artists, narrative designers, everything, just to create what he did with the game. Eventually, he did decide to shelve the game, so it never really shipped, but he has an amazing portfolio because of that game, and so do the rest of us. So that's really fantastic. And for me, I'm not taking credit for any of the finished missions. I just contributed. So I consider myself a contributing writer of that series. And I have my own portfolio of things that I actually wrote, and storylines and plots and beats that I actually put together for that. That if the project were ever to get off the ground, and whoever wanted to, like, if we had a budget, then we certainly could get it on and popping. I would love to join it again on the side, as like a wonderful side project. Although I have like a bunch of side projects, but that 3 years I really used to sort of engage in other aspects, learning aspects with my creativity. And as I told you, I also worked on another game under Myth Kitty Press, who is a studio. It's called Status Quo: Chronicles of a Universe at War. And I actually did write quests and missions and dialogue for those games, and developed like entire, sequences for that particular game. And the game has not shipped yet. It's still in development. So I'll actually be able to see whether or not like my stuff is actually being used. But I am actually actively being credited as a primary writer. Not the primary writer, but as one of the primary writers on that game. So check it out. If you guys get ever like an update from that actual studio, you'll see that I'm on there, Kobe R. Rice. And I'm really proud of the work that I did for that game franchise. And I will return in the future if I have time, maybe during the summer or something like that. So took that time, and then when I was ready to sort of get back into the fray and really focus again on my creativity, I joined. Actually, I didn't really join. I got essentially headhunted for the opening inaugural year of the MFA program in theater arts and generative dramaturgy at the University of Arizona. And the program was founded, created, and established by my mentor. And she had worked with me in the past, and really, apparently, flatteringly and surprisingly, was like very impressed and very what is the word I'm looking for that escaped me? Very confident, confident in my abilities to be a part of the inaugural cohort and to really shape where the program is going or would be going. And I was very flattered. I was even more flattered because the program itself was essentially fully funded. Again, I love fully funded programs. I live for full funding. Love it. And it was in beautiful Tucson. And Tucson is beautiful. It's a little too dry for me, and it doesn't have enough green, but I really did enjoy living there, eating. The food is amazing. The people are really nice, and the living is really, really cheap. And I really enjoyed that aspect of being there. And of course, I said yes, I was going to join the theater arts program, because at that point, I had some experience in novel writing and publishing, game writing and game design, and screenwriting and TV writing and film production. So I wanted to sort of fill out my creative repertoire with the one missing part that I hadn't really really like jumped into fully yet, and that was theater. As I mentioned to you guys before, I produced a play festival, and I had basically written a bunch of short plays in a one act play. But I hadn't really delved fully into the study of and the immersion in theater. And so I said, yeah, why not? Of course. And in my brain, because graduate school is not necessarily a strict 9 to 5, I had a lot of flexibility to continue to do the other things that I really am interested in doing: novel writing, game design, studying television and television writing, and things like that. And so, of course, I went. And when I got there, it was June 2016. It was a reawakening of sorts because, as I said, I stayed home with my little girl for almost 2 years after she was born. So it was time in many ways to sort of reclaim myself and to help her walk a little bit further into her independence and to cut the apron strings. Not all of them, just a couple of them. And finally get her out of mommy's arms into somebody else's loving, care. And so it was really her first foray into a daycare setting, and that was very challenging, obviously. And so she started daycare maybe a few months before she turned 2. And it was a rough transition at first, but after about a month, she really got used to it and started to love it. And then, unfortunately, that daycare had to close shop, so we had to switch in January of 2017, and that was another month of hard readjustment. But since then, she had basically been going to the same daycare for, the next, she would be going to the same daycare for the next 2.5 years. And she loved it, and they love her, and it was always a great experience and affordable, which I really like. And in the meantime, while that's happening on like the personal side, I am experiencing a whole different world that I had never really had exposure to, because theater can be very expensive. And so I maybe had gone to like a few theater shows on campus, but not real, and maybe a couple in high school, but not really any shows like consistently, and shows that I wanted to see. So now was my chance. And because I was coming into the theater arts program as a dramaturg, I was essentially not only learning theater arts as a whole, but learning about the specific craft of dramaturgy. So the 3 years that I spent at U of A were really focused on developing a core competency in the canon and in like the big names in dramatic theory, in the history of theater. So we took 2 history classes, a dramatic theory class, etc. And then we also got into playwriting. We got into dramaturgy, but in a very different way than how most programs do it. We actually focused on classical dramaturgy, experimental dramaturgy, and new play dramaturgy. And then for me on the side, I actually was very interested and I explored specifically adaptation dramaturgy and musical dramaturgy. So I had training in essentially 5 areas for about 3 years. And this was not just in the classroom. We spent a lot of time in the studio doing production dramaturgy things, like trying to put together shows and events and play festivals and readings. And on top of that, eventually, like after the first year of having the foundational core training and then being a dramaturg on a black box production, the next couple of years would actually allow me to start not just dramaturging, but directing as well, which I fell in love with and obviously was super amped about because I was vaguely interested in that when I was doing film production at UW-Madison and studying it over the years. But I think, once again, I was too afraid to openly admit that that's what I wanted to do. And it's very hard because I didn't really know many female directors, especially black female directors. Especially black female directors who were interested in directing things that I was interested in, like action, sci-fi, horror. Like, you could literally probably count on maybe like a hand how many are out there that are doing that are like well known. But as I would come to find out, there are many of us actually doing that on the independent level. I just am not as aware of them as I could have been. And so I'm going to work on that. And I'm still working on that. But back to the program, I really jumped into directing, into dramaturgy. I really made sure in every single class, I made sure to turn theoretical experiences into practical experiences. And it didn't matter what the project was. If the final report was like a paper or something like that, I made sure that it could be something that I worked on that became a part of my portfolio that I could also put as a line on my CV. Because I knew that one of the drawbacks, because of my previous experience in academia, one of the drawbacks of joining a graduate program is that sometimes, because they're so detached from the real working world, and I don't mean to say that academia is not real, but they're detached from the professional working world, and they're so invested in academia, sometimes these programs forget to give you actionable, legible lines that you can put on your CV or on your resume. They forget to help you qualify your experience and transform it into actual tangible skills. And having already had that experience of having to really mine skills from an industry that's not really specializing in that, I was already coming in with the mindset that every single thing that I did in this graduate program somehow had to turn into a skill, a tool, or a line on my CV, or an experience that I grew from emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and professionally. So I really jumped into it, and I definitely was able to succeed in turning that master's degree into not just academic cred, but also professional cred that I could put on a CV. And my mentor was also very well aware of that, sort of the importance of that endeavor as well. So she and I were on the same page, and she really helped to maximize my career potential by helping me to find like really interesting, comprehensive, and challenging professional experiences to add to my CV, but also turning every classroom experience into a professional experience. So I'm going to talk a lot more about that in my next podcast when I'm talking about whether or not an MFA is worth it, because I think that it is, but you have to really figure out how to itemize an MFA and really transform it into professional experience so that you can be prepared for the working world when you graduate. And it doesn't mean lying or embellishing. It means telling the truth, but also making sure that whatever your truth is, you're seeing that truth to its logical final conclusion, and you're actually producing shows, you're actually directing shows, you're actually dramaturging shows. Like, you have to be actively doing that, or whatever it is you're trying to do for your program. You have to be doing the thing in order for you to put it on your CV. You can't put something on your CV that you haven't done, okay? So we'll talk about that in the next episode. But during that year, that time, I not only was able to really get a really deep, comprehensive education in theater arts, but I was also able to publish 2 more novels. I wanted to publish more, but I'm not going to really be that hard on myself. Publish 2 more novels, really develop a really lovely, heavy slate of intellectual property and ideas, start developing the foundations of several other written novel series that I wanted to produce, create transmedia projects that could be novels and also films and also television shows and also merchandise and things like that. So I taught myself a lot about franchising and licensing and how to create properties that lent themselves to a multitude of media, basically, and a multitude of income streams, if we're being really honest with ourselves. and I did a lot of that. I also expanded Rebel Ragdoll Press into several subsidiaries that I'm working on building now. So I went from Rebel Ragdoll Press to Rebel Ragdoll Press, Rebel Ragdoll Productions, Chick Rogue Studios. So Rebel Ragdoll Productions are for film and TV and sci-fi, fantasy, and action, and horror. Chick Rogue Studios is for game development, so I want to build that out eventually. And then also the Bohemian Badass, which is the creative training and educational arm, of my Rebel Ragdoll Fempire in progress. And that's basically the way, the Bohemian Badass in particular, is the way that I give back to like the world around me in terms of the knowledge that I gain in my journey, and being able to translate that knowledge into something actionable, something that others can learn from and use to build their own careers. So I've bitten off a lot over the past decade, obviously, and I'm going to continue to bite off more than I can chew, and I'm excited about that. And basically, the end of my sort of 10-year journey, and I guess sort of like the beginning of the next 10-year journey, now sees me here talking to you September 15th, 2019. Basically sees me looking into the future and figuring out what the next 10 years need to look like. And for me personally, that includes developing my company brick by brick by brick. That includes being a theater educator and getting better at that and getting trained in that. That includes solidifying my foundation for myself and my family. That includes writing, directing, and producing my own plays, my own TV shows, and occasionally my own films. That means probably in like another couple years or so, kicking off the development of Chick Rogue Studios' first game. And that also means building up the Bohemian Badass in a way that is sustainable but also impactful. So the way that I want to sort of honor my creativity from here on in is to start by really honoring what it is I'm doing right now. And that's becoming the best theater instructor and educator I can be. That's in continuing to work on my plays, my screenplays, and my teleplays, whether actively or in shadow development. And that definitely means me continuing working on my novels and building up a really intense, large, and flavorful backlist. And novels are particularly important in this particular instance because of all the mediums that I'm working in, aside from theater, the novel is the final expression of an idea. And what I mean when I say that is that a novel is your vision, and a novel itself can be copywritten, can be disseminated, can be sold. It's a product. Screenplays and teleplays or TV scripts are not the final expression of an idea. They're actually just a blueprint for an idea. So screenplays are often not really sold for the pleasure of reading. They're really sold for the pleasure of one's study. Or if, like in my case, every screenplay or TV play, teleplay that I actually finish writing and I polish, I'll probably have bound. But people don't just go to the library looking for screenplays to read for pleasure. Usually it's to study really good screenplays so that they can build really good films. And because screenplays are not the final expression of themselves, we have to look to the film or the TV episode as the final expression of itself. And those are a lot harder to get off the ground, trust me, because I'm doing it right now, than a novel is. They're both really difficult in a sense, but with a novel, you can keep a lot of your overhead down and the cost down and still get a really fantastic product if you are able to find the right help and you hire out the way you're supposed to, and you find people who are trying to be fair and not just to you but to themselves with the prices that they charge. You can essentially produce novels and have ownership over that final product. So that's why the novel is very important as sort of a cornerstone of my business model and my creative life and liberty model right now. Film and television is one of the cornerstones, but that's something that I have to sort of work towards much more slowly. And that's why I'm taking my time with Sandman. Sandman, I would love to start principal photography, crossing my fingers, as of July of 2020. And I'm going to take the entire year just writing and developing the entire limited series. And that's going to go sort of one day, 1 week at a time. Game development, that's a whole nother level of investment as well. And a lot of games that are produced independently don't ever ship, meaning that they're not ever finished, and then they're never sold. So I'm really trying to, in my endeavor to build my backlist and build my career, take a long view, but also focus on the products and the properties that I know I can get out there in a timely fashion. And that I know at the end of the day are like the centerpiece for all the other sort of rights that I can exploit off of those novels. So if you, for example, the Books of Ezekiel series, because it's a series of novels, they can now be turned into screenplays, teleplays, or TV scripts. They can be turned into merch because I have concept art and I have like characters. They can be turned into video game franchises, toys, board games, an animated series, web series, as I said, film series, TV series. I would love the Books of Ezekiel actually to be made into a TV series, but that's a whole different ball of wax. And me having those novels and having ownership over that copyright is in itself ownership over all of those other rights that I can exploit. So that's why the novel is like the cornerstone and centerpiece of my business model, because from it springs all other opportunities. But it does not mean that I'm not going to continue to develop myself as a screenwriter, film director, film producer, theater director, theater producer, or as a game designer, developer, writer, or as an educator across all those disciplines. So that's basically what's happening, you guys. That has been my 10-year journey. And going back to the original premise of like greenlighting myself, from me deciding to start my novel in 2009 to me taking my trip overseas in 2011, to me changing my course of study in 2012, to me getting my first master's in sociology in 2013 and achieving all those creative milestones, to me jumping into video game writing and design and actually being able to work for creative video game houses, to me deciding to go to my MFA program in theater arts, to me really like maximizing my time in that program to develop myself as a theater artist, director, and to develop myself in other creative zones, to even, the master's degree that I worked on, which was, as you guys know, an adaptation, a cyberpunk noir television series adaptation of William Shakespeare's Roman history tetralogy, to me getting my MFA finally in May, to then, as I mentioned last podcast, me directing even more over the summer and working as a development assistant in Hollywood, or in a Hollywood sort of based management boutique, to me now, I don't know how many like fingers I have. To me, this is 11 and 12. To me now, being a theater educator and still actively working on my novels, now working on my Sandman independently produced and directed TV series, and to basically all the other stuff that I'm still committed to doing, my journey has been a series of self greenlighting myself. And so I guess that's what I want to leave with you guys. And I'm going to sign off soon because I'm tired. I have more laundry to do and I need a nap and I have like my Sandman stuff to do. But I really want to leave you guys with that idea. Stay reflective, stay self-aware, stay self-critical in a positive way, not in a negative way. Continue to develop yourself, continue to reflect and look back and see how much you've grown, because I have grown certainly so much between the ages of 24 and 34. And give yourself permission to be awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like, just give yourself permission. Eventually, especially because I had a child, I didn't sort of mention this, I had realized when I was in Hollywood, or I'm calling it all sorts of things, Los Angeles, Long Beach in particular, that Hollywood is not necessarily healthy or conducive for me, who wants to maintain a work-life balance and center my daughter and center my sanity and center my entrepreneurial drive and my creative freedom. It's a great place to be, and I would love at some point, maybe in the future, to just get a taste of working for television. But I'm also mostly in love. I mean, when I say mostly, I mean 99.9% in love with the idea of just starting my own production house, greenlighting myself, and doing my own creative stuff. That greenlighting of self has become very essential to my identity as an artist. And this is not to say that working for mainstream Hollywood and being an independent artist are mutually exclusive per se, and people can find overlaps. At this point, I prefer not to find an overlap because I want to be at the head of my own media empire, creating my own films, my own TV series, green lighting myself and my ideas, and eventually, when I get to that point, green lighting other people's ideas and creative dreams, specifically for people of color who are underrepresented as directors, writers, and producers in this medium, and with a specific focus on women of color who are super underrepresented in this medium, although we are slowly but surely gaining more ground. So I'm really excited about that prospect. And I want you guys to get excited about that too. Sorry, y'all. My brother was making all kinds of crazy noise in the background. I was like, let me put this on pause, all right? Plus, I was sounding a little lethargic anyway and slurring my words. Anyway, to wrap up, green lighting oneself is probably the most important thing that you're going to be able to do in this life. And if you're really serious about becoming an independent author or independent filmmaker or independent producer or artist, the self green light is really, really important, because a lot of times, especially nowadays, the big cheeses, the big wigs, the people at the top who are sort of kind of controlling the media and media propaganda and decide who gets to be big and famous or whatever, they tend to look for people who have already like done the work or who already have followings or what have you. And we may or may not ever get recognized by these entities. But for me, that's not really ever the point. For me, like, my purpose is to create the kind of work and art that I want to see in the world, and that also really represents my unique voice and that will exist beyond my very short life here on earth. I have been so grateful for the authors and artists and filmmakers who have put their work out into the world, no matter how big it's gotten, because someone somewhere is going to feel impacted by your voice. And you shouldn't deny even one person of that experience, and you shouldn't deny yourself. So, of course, the most important person to please when you're making art is yourself. But in addition to not pleasing yourself when you're not making your art, you're also depriving someone else of being able to look into a piece of work and see themselves reflected and see understanding and empathy and their voice and their humor or their perspective reflected back. You're also denying them the opportunity to have a completely different perspective reflected back to them. And you're denying them the opportunity to grow and to be more fully human by learning from someone else, And so I just think art is so important. I really do. I think it's so important. I think everything about the art world is important, no matter who you are in the art world or what it is you actually do. Just please keep doing it. Don't worry about the commercial success. I'm not really one of those people who say that, oh, if you build it, they will come. And if you work at it long enough, you will succeed. There's no guarantee of any of that happening, really. There's no guarantee if the product will ever take off. The only thing you can guarantee is that you will be transformed through the process and that you will connect with the process for better or for worse. And so as an artist, I live for the process. And in order to engage in that process as fully as possible, I have to keep giving myself the green light to go forward and make my art. No matter how many obstacles are in my way, I'm going to keep doing it. And I really want you guys to go and do it too. So give yourself the green light. And hey, if you guys have any, reflections on the past 10 years of your life as an artist or like as a person or as whatever you do, I would love to, get some feedback from you guys either in the comments below or on my website or via email. A lot of you contact me through email because we're all introverts and we don't want to put ourselves out there. And that's great. That's fantastic. But please do, because I've learned so much from my journey. And just in this reflection alone, it's taught me a lot about how far I've come. And I hope and pray that my next 10-year journey will not be cut short, knock on wood, and that I maximize every single step of that journey as much as I possibly can. So having said that, y'all, I'm going to go take a quick nap, finish up my laundry, get the Sandman, spec document out, and have a very relaxing rest of my evening, or try to at least, because tomorrow I go back into the fray, and we have a really exciting week of theater and awesomeness lined up. So I have to just get ready, get my mind set, get my mind focused on everything, and really just do the damn thing. All right? So I will talk to you guys soon. Keep it indie, keep creating, keep writing, stay badass, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Mwah! Bye! From my very tired, very, very fatigued face. Bye!